Red Dead Redemption, releasing over a decade ago at this point, was an open-world adventure that captivated many. The first Red Dead Redemption is still widely considered one of the best games of all time, which is why rumors of Rockstar Games remaking it continue to rise. Rumors have begun circulating that Rockstar Games may have quietly shelved a remake of Red Dead Redemption that it had been working on. This is apparently due to the fact that the studio wants all hands on deck for Grand Theft Auto 6 and the poor reception of Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Around the time that these rumors cropped up, Rockstar announced that it had no plans for any more major updates to Red Dead Online. This means that fans of the Red Dead Redemption franchise have nothing to look forward to, and the studio has put its entire focus on Grand Theft Auto 6. While Grand Theft Auto 6 be a great game when it comes out, the possible cancellation of a Red Dead Redemption remake is not fair to the many fans of the franchise. Both Red Dead Redemption games were groundbreaking, and they have garnered a significant fan base that has been left with nothing. All that they can do is replay the story modes of both games, or mess around in an online mode that will no longer get new content. On top of that, the first game in the series came out 12 years ago and was just waiting for the remake treatment, which Rockstar needs to deliver. Frankly, it would be a logical progression from the prequel to step back into the shoes of John Marston's story in more modernized form. Even though it's not likely anytime soon, playing either a remaster or remake of Red Dead Redemption on a similar graphical scale of its successor would be the perfect way to bring the story full circle. Theoretically, a Red Dead Redemption remake could also be the perfect setup for a sequel as well, assuming Rockstar Games even wishes to take the Red Dead story that far. One of the first thoughts among hardcore fans after finishing Red Dead Redemption 2 happened to be a pretty common thread: what if Red Dead Redemption was remade in Red Dead Redemption 2's engine? While both games were technically developed under the Rage proprietary engine at Rockstar, the graphical fidelity and presentation has come a long way since 2010. Plus, with Red Dead Redemption 2 including a significant portion of the original Red Dead Redemption map alongside the new content, many assumed that portion of the map was included for the express reason of a future remake. It's not unfair to assume that portion of the map was going to be used at some point for the game. However, there's not a single main quest in Red Dead Redemption 2 that brings players out to Armadillo or any of the surrounding regions. The closest players could get there through normal quests are in the epilogue for the game, which doesn't go any further west than Blackwater. Players are free to venture out there at their own leisure, and there's even populated towns and a few side quests to complete out there as well. While there's not much to do there during Red Dead Redemption 2, that area of the map could be a perfect jumping-off point for a Red Dead Redemption remake. Red Dead Redemption came out in 2010 and was a huge critical success. It was the first time that players were introduced to John Marston and the Dutch van der Linde gang, and is still considered to be one of the best Wild West games ever made. The world that Rockstar constructed was beautiful, the story was heart-wrenching, and the gameplay was engaging. Players fell in love with the colorful cast of characters and spent hours living out their Wild West dreams. 8 years later, Rockstar finally delivered on a sequel to the award-winning title. However, the studio chose to craft a prequel to the game instead of continuing where the last one left off. Players were put in the shoes of Arthur Morgan during the downfall of the Dutch van der Linde gang, and the players instantly fell in love. The world that Rockstar built for the prequel was even more expansive than the first game, and it came even closer to feeling like a real-life version of the Old West. The game world felt alive and lived in, the story was even more wild, and the cast of characters all felt lifelike. While the first game gave players a beautiful world to explore, the prequel took things to the next level and gave players a world that felt ripped straight from a Western. The evolution of the Red Dead Redemption franchise is great for the players, and they can only dream about how lifelike the third entry will be. However, the huge differences in mechanics and graphics makes the transition from the prequel to the original kind of jarring. If players want to play the games chronologically, then they have to start in the newer Red Dead Redemption 2 before going to the sometimes dated-feeling Red Dead Redemption. The older feel of the first game can put off some players who may want to experience its story, and a remake could have fixed this issue. Giving it the same paint job as the second game could have made the transition far less jarring, and would have opened the game up to a far bigger audience. Rockstar Games has also created a playable model of John Marston inside Red Dead Redemption 2. Once players finish the story of the second game, they are put in control of Marston for the epilogue chapter. They have to build the ranch that Marston's family lives in during Red Dead Redemption and attempt to put the crime lifestyle behind them. This means that the studio already has most of the game world done and the playable character. While it would still require some significant work on Rockstar Games' part, some groundwork has already been laid. The studio would still have to make the towns look like how it did in Red Dead Redemption, add in Nuevo Paraíso, and recreate the story. The studio could use a lot of the assets that were found in Red Dead Redemption 2, and the remake could be completed in a much smaller time frame. The southmost portion of Red Dead Redemption 2's map is home to two sections of the first Red Dead Redemption. New Austin consists of a vast desert area to the west that slowly transforms into a prairie and a wetland as players move eastward. This area serves as the first explorable territory in Red Dead Redemption, and the final territory players can unlock in Red Dead Redemption 2. West Elizabeth, on the other hand, is made up of a densely forested, mountainous area to the west and a large empty prairie to the east. This is the final area players can explore in the first game, and one of the last few places that is introduced in Red Dead Redemption 2. Though Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't use the setting of New Austin as frequently as West Elizabeth, both areas are fully rendered. All Rockstar has to do is fill them with activities and content that are appropriate for Red Dead Redemption's story and time. Add in Nuevo Paraíso, Red Dead Redemption's southern Mexican territory, and the map is complete. Seeing as most of the actors in Red Dead Redemption reprise their roles in the sequel, it wouldn't be crazy to see them agree to a remake from the ground up. Rob Wyathoff, who plays John Marston, reprised his role in Red Dead Redemption 2, a job no one thought he would undertake considering he left the film industry soon after the first game. Getting Wyathoff back into the saddle for a remake of Red Dead Redemption might be a matter of striking while the iron is hot. Since Red Dead Redemption 2's cast knows how good the franchise can be, getting them all back into the studio sooner rather than later would make sense. Part of why Red Dead Redemption 2 was able to succeed as well as it did was because of its context, with fans knowing the ultimate fate of the gang and John Marston's eventual quest. Obviously, that wasn't everything, but it was a big part of the game's narrative despite the story being centered on Arthur's journey. However, that purposefully in-depth epilogue with John Marston sets up a remake of Red Dead Redemption perfectly. Returning to New Austin, knowing fully well what happened to Dutch's gang and Arthur, makes one of the best Rockstar Games narratives that much better. Plus, with modern amenities, Red Dead Redemption could become even more impressive. Of course, at the end of the day, remaking Red Dead Redemption anytime soon is highly unrealistic. Rockstar Games is almost certainly working on the next Grand Theft Auto first, so it'll be a while before a remake could be realized. However, it's definitely not impossible given that there's plenty of circumstantial evidence that could lead to a future where Red Dead Redemption is remade. Red Dead Redemption was a great game at the time, and it still is. Recently, it has become overshadowed by its predecessor, and it should not be. Red Dead Redemption 2 took the franchise to the next level and brought in many more players, but the first one also deserves recognition. It may be dated, but it started the Red Dead Redemption story and delivered its own heart-wrenching Old West story. The story of John Marston deserves to be witnessed by players, and a remake could have done just that. Furthermore, Rockstar could introduce new gameplay attributes in the RDR1 remake that would be more indicative of what's to come in RDR3. As much as a great game Red Dead Redemption 2 is, it still has its own share of problems, and much of it comes from it being a prequel. There are plenty of moments in RDR2 where the game stirs away from the story beat introduced in the first Red Dead Redemption, hence making the latter a more incoherent experience. For instance, Arthur Morgan isn't mentioned at all in Red Dead Redemption. While this makes sense from the game's development point of view, it is still disappointing for the fans of RDR2 who have yet to play RDR1. Arthur's absence from RDR1 is still an understandable inconsistency compared to some of the more prominent ones that definitely need addressing in an RDR remake. For example, it's mentioned in RDR1 that John and Abigail had 2 children. However, in RDR2, players only get to meet Jack. Even in the game's epilogue that takes place years away after the events of the main game, Jack's sister isn't seen or mentioned. Plot holes like these are plenty, and it would be immersion-breaking for people jumping ships from RDR2 to RDR1, rather than vice versa. Hence, a remake could fix those inconsistencies and set things right for RDR3. Both Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 leave plenty of room for a sequel. Red Dead Redemption 2 diligently sets up Sadie Adler as a possible protagonist of Red Dead Redemption 3. Sadie is one of the most complex characters in the Red Dead Redemption 2, and fans get to witness it all, her growth from a widow in despair to a ruthless bounty hunter. In the final moments of RDR2, Sadie bid farewell to the Marstons and presumably moved to South America, as she had previously shown interest in going there. Sadie's growth is empowering, and there is plenty more to explore in her story, not to mention how enticing a South American Western setting sounds. With Grand Theft Auto 6 rumored to feature a female protagonist, RDR3 could likely take a similar direction, and fans certainly wouldn't be complaining. Unfortunately, just like Arthur, Sadie is absent from RDR1 and isn't mentioned at all. While it's unreasonable to expect Rockstar Games to make a remake where Sadie plays a prominent role in John's redemption, she could still be vaguely referenced to set up RDR3. Rockstar could pull off a GTA 5 scenario where GTA 4's protagonist Nico Bellic is loosely mentioned by Lester. Moreover, there is a wanted poster of Nico lying around in a house in Sandy Shores. If Rockstar is planning to make Sadie the protagonist of RDR3, a subtle reference in a RDR1 remake could go a long way in making RDR1 feel authentic to RDR2, without spoiling the original experience. On the other hand, the original Red Dead Redemption does a fine job of setting the 19-year-old Jack Marston as a possible protagonist of Red Dead Redemption 3. If that happens to be the case, a RDR1 remake would be needed more than ever, especially for people who haven't played the original and missed out on Jack's character arc in the first game. Whether RDR3 would feature Jack Marston or Sadie Adler, or both, is currently unknown. However, a RDR1 remake could open up the pathways for both of them as a future protagonist. Rockstar Games have always been the studio to push gaming consoles to the limit. It's still astonishing to see Grand Theft Auto 5 running smoothly on a PS3 and Xbox 360. Similarly, Red Dead Redemption 2 features one of the most gorgeous and highly detailed open worlds ever in a video game, and it's hard to not take a break every now and then to just take in the countless breathtaking views it offers. With the release of PS5 and Xbox Series X, fans are yet again eager to see what visual and technical achievements the company could accomplish with its upcoming titles. With Red Dead Redemption 3 seemingly years away from release, and possibly won't see the day of light until the end of this gen, if at all, a RDR1 remake would be a perfect appetizer to keep fans busy. Many AAA developers tend to remake or remaster their last-gen titles to get familiar with the next-gen consoles. Although Rockstar Games isn't known for remaking their titles, they could make an exception this time around with Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2 has quickly become one of Rockstar Games' most respected games. Initially, the RPG and simulatory gameplay elements were polarizing for fans because of the game's patient and atmospheric nature. However, in retrospect, many have come to appreciate Red Dead Redemption 2's open-world, innovative efforts in interactivity, as well as its award-winning story. The game's predecessor received similar accolades as well back in 2010, though not many talk about the game that is arguably responsible for the whole series at large. Red Dead Revolver was really where the series began, even if the connections to the source game are loose at best. Back before Rockstar Games struck gold with Red Dead Redemption and its sequel, the comparatively simplistic predecessor was a solid entry in a very different type of game. Prior to the open-world designs popularized by Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar Games' brand of Western shooters took on an arcade-like gameplay design. Red Dead Revolver was a linear third-person shooter full of arenas and missions rife with various enemy types and challenges. Characters were more caricature than nuanced personality, and the narrative was campy but compelling. The Red Dead series has come a long way, but a modernized open-world remake would make sense for Revolver. Even before discussing the more obvious gameplay changes that would come with a modern remake, the characters would likely change to make them more narratively interesting. It's important to note that the core premise of Red Harlow's story is interesting. Rockstar Games has always seemed to nail down the motivations of revenge stories, even if subsequent narrative beats or rising action never quite land the same way. However, assuming this same premise is adapted into an open-world adventure with the potential for many more hours of gameplay, characters like Red Harlow, Jack Swift, Buffalo Soldier, Pig Josh, or Annie Stokes need to be far more compelling. Ideally, a Red Dead Revolver remake modernizes the original narrative of Red Harlow in the same vein as Red Dead Redemption and its sequel. Considering John Marston's bounty hunter quest for revenge is at least loosely based on Red's story in Red Dead Revolver, it wouldn't be too hard to envision Red Harlow getting a similar story. Humanizing Red Harlow might not be the most challenging aspect of a remake, but inserting the extraneous characters into the main narrative will be far more difficult. Extra characters in the original Red Dead Revolver were just part of isolated chapters with their own sub-stories, making their stories more difficult to adapt. However, the more obvious changes in a modernized remake would come in the form of gameplay changes. Realistically, at least in terms of AAA appeal, there really isn't an audience for the arcade-like gameplay of the original Red Dead Revolver, since most fans are more familiar with the more modern Red Dead Redemption 2. Ironic as it is, from a fan perspective, many aren't even familiar with how Red Dead Revolver played or was designed other than obscure references to it. If anything, a Red Dead Revolver remake should adopt a redemption-style open world alongside a revised narrative. Arcade-like modes could serve as an extra mode, but not the main attraction. An ambitious remake could borrow from the systems in Red Dead Redemption 2 to enhance the Red Dead Revolver experience. There's virtually no interactivity even close to the same level of world building and capability in Red Dead Redemption 2 during the Red Dead Revolver story. Red Dead Revolver is a strictly linear third-person shooter divided into arenas and chapters. Assuming the narrative follows suit, expanding out the gameplay design into a Wild West open world, like the newer games, could certainly enhance the Red Dead Revolver experience. Having a more familiar, modern gameplay experience will certainly entice more fans into a Revolver remake. All in all, Red Dead Revolver certainly has the bones for a modernized remake that fans would genuinely enjoy. Serving as the foundation for the compelling narratives and impressive worlds of later Red Dead games, enhancing Red Dead Revolver with modern tendencies would make a lot of sense. Red Dead Redemption 2's excellent open-world design could easily influence a gameplay redesign of Red Dead Revolver in a way that fans would be familiar with and would enjoy. That way, Red Harlow's story remains faithful to the core spirit of Red Dead as a whole, whilst also appealing to the grander fanbase who's used to Rockstar's open-world gameplay experience. Rockstar is leaving money on the table without a Red Dead Redemption and a Red Dead Revolver remake. Despite rumors that Rockstar has lost interest in a Red Dead remake, the desire for such a title is clearly present. Considering this remake could expand upon the game's original story logically, it seems obvious that a remake would be very profitable for Rockstar, especially when considering how many of the necessary assets already existing. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then, from SMPV, it's goodbye.